Hi everybody, welcome to Custom B&B Hosting and the Positive Cash Flow Facebook group. Today, really awesome to have you all here, and we've got a special guest, Ben Chamberlain, with us today. Say g'day if you're online now, and just send us a wave, give us an emoji, give us some love, or if you're watching it later, hit replay. We'd love to know that you've watched it and whether you found it of value or not. So say g'day. But I'll welcome Ben and thank you for joining us. You're at work today, so we appreciate that you're taking some time out to have a chat with us on our group today. Do you want to introduce yourself and give a bit of your background? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
Sure. Thanks, Meredith, and thanks for having me. It was a bit of a surprise when I got the phone call from you to ask me to join you guys. And it's my first time live, so bear with me if I make some mistakes. But yeah, my name's Ben, and my business is Chamberlain Landscape, and we specialise in garden maintenance, mainly scheduled garden maintenance. So we look after a lot of display homes for a couple of big volume builders, including Metricon and Porter Davis. That's probably the bulk of my business, but a lot of body corporates, owners corporates, and then dipping our toes into the short-term rental market, which is great to have the contact with you. So
yeah. Exactly. And I thought the whole point of having you on today is to talk about, as property investors and property owners, what do we need to do to really have a system in place to take care of our property, whether it's on short-term rental or long-term rental. We'll talk short-term today, but, you've got to have a kind of a plan, a maintenance plan, and gardens are included in that. But the other part is about, it's about presentation. And if you want to, we all know if you want to sell it, first impressions really matter. And when someone drives up the street to have a look at a property, it's that first impression of the garden that really has an impact. And I think the same's true for Airbnb. You put photos up to advertise it. As people approach the property, that's the first thing they're going to see. So I think it matters from a selling point of view, but it also just matters for long-term maintenance and care of your property. So that's why I really
absolutely
want to have you today to just sort of talk that through and educate us a bit about what's some good systems. So I guess you work with investment property owners to maintain their gardens while they rent them out. What is the worst garden design or thing that you've seen implemented, or something that just does not fit or ring true for an investment property?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of hard to pinpoint, say one particular garden and go through the whole garden. But an Airbnb short-term rental property that I maintained recently, they have a sort of nice, I guess, a bit of a personal touch to it, or they've left it with a bit of a personal touch, I should say, with a little guinea pig hutch in the back corner of the garden. And when it's your own house, that's fantastic. I'm sure the kids probably loved it and had a great time. But it's a messy part of the garden. It's hard for me to maintain, to make it look neat and tidy. And there's sort of no use for that for a short-term renter, unless they're bringing their guinea pig with them. But those sorts of things, little sort of personal touches. Some personal touches are great. Another Airbnb place that I look after has a hammock, which is really usable for the short-term tenant. But a guinea pig hutch is probably sort of bit useless, maybe. The other things I sort of thought about were, some places have a hot water system which is in a really awkward spot down the blind side of a house. That usually is where you might drag the bins out. When people are staying in a short-term rental, they probably want to make sure they have the bins picked up, on the right day and all that sort of stuff. And to have obstacles in the way might be a bit frustrating. And while we're on bins, I think that's something that maybe gets overlooked even in people's normal properties, where they live, but particularly in an Airbnb, short-term rental, to have somewhere specifically to put the bins is really important for someone, I think. Easy to access, easy to wheel it out to the street, and easy for anyone that might be maintaining it, myself included. Can use the green bin, or the cleaners when they come after the stay can have easy access to those bins. So they're probably the things that I thought of most as far as inconvenience or poor design, maybe. So
they're really important things. It's kind of it's not the glamorous part of the business, is it? But it's the really functional bit that can really annoy guests if it's not, if it doesn't work efficiently. And certainly then in terms of that efficiency for maintenance staff and cleaning crew, definitely having those things in place are really helpful. It's a really something I actually haven't thought about very well myself either. So first impressions are important for gardeners, as I've already mentioned. And what would be your recommendations for plants to use for a short-term rental to try and give a bit of a wow factor, but they're actually quite maintenance friendly?
Yep. So I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier in our pre-interview talk, that I think like a nice, well-kept hedge is can be really important, and I think it creates a bit of a perception of order and neatness. A nice straight line hedge. So some examples of that would be, a simple lily-pilly or waterhousia hedge. Something that's a little bit smaller might be a Murraya. And when I was thinking of these plants, it kind of got me thinking that, particularly in a rental sort of property, my view would be to keep it sort of simple. And by that, I sort of mean some nice bright green foliage, simple green foliage. And if you're going to have flowers, I would steer clear of annuals. They just take way too much maintenance. But anything with a white flower, green and white in the garden, is sort of classic, timeless. And I would assume most people, when they're decorating the interior of their house, would have a similar concept of something classic and simple. And I think the garden can easily reflect that with those sort of plants. I think probably some sort of specimen tree somewhere in the front garden would be nice. A magnolia with a nice big white flower again, or an ornamental pear. If you wanted to go real top shelf, you could put in a nice Japanese maple, something like that. But sort of one or two max of those sort of specimen trees can be nice. They sort of look after themselves. Trees in general, even when they're untidy, can look tidy, if that sort of makes sense. So I would stick with those. Some nice mulch on the ground or a ground cover. One of my favourites is a star jasmine. Again, nice little white flower, and in spring it has an awesome smell. So things like that. Again, classic bright green foliage and a white flower if you like flowers,
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, great advice. Fantastic. Okay. So what kind of maintenance schedule do you recommend for property investors? And how does this help save money, like long term, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think generally maintenance, regular maintenance saves money in a bunch of ways. I think that's true for not only the garden but for your house, and let's say your body as well. As an example, the more you can maintain it, at a lower cost more often, you're definitely going to be in better shape. So what was the first part of the question? I answered the second part. Sorry.
That's all right. What would you recommend as a maintenance schedule?
Yeah, that's right. So on our display homes, we look after them at least fortnightly, some of them weekly. And I'm not advocating that an investor would have to have their garden maintained that often. But in spring and summer, fortnightly is probably a good starting point. No more than 3 weekly. And in winter, you could probably drop back to monthly. But I do understand, and this is probably a bit of a work in progress with Airbnb style or short-term rental style maintenance, is that I think the landlords maybe don't want to interrupt the tenants, while they're staying there for that time. I think if it is definitely a really short term, then you could schedule it to happen in between those stays, just like you would your cleaner. But if they're staying a little bit longer, I don't think it's unreasonable to mention to them that the gardener will just be popping by to maintain the garden. You could ask the question, is there a convenient time during the day when you're not going to be there? Because I think that they would appreciate that more than it being an inconvenience. To have the lawn mowed at least, and just a bit of a general tidy up. It might not be a full length maintenance visit, but just an interim one would definitely, especially in spring and summer. I think that's needed. So,
yeah,
but I do understand for short-term rental, it can be difficult when people are staying there. So.
I think you're spot on, though. Like, you can absolutely just tell people. It's just always about communication, isn't it? Say, look, we have the gardener comes every month or every 2 weeks on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, which could be totally fine, and we can just let people know that. I think that's completely reasonable. Or if you want to be super flexible, then you go, you do coordinate it for when you've got a checkout happening.
Yeah.
But I think it's all okay. All right. I think, yeah, absolutely. All that you've talked about is just completely, like, it's really reasonable and, obvious kind of stuff to do. But I think having the systemized, the system in place is the bit that just takes the pressure off everybody remembering or things getting out of control and messy. But the other thing I think is really important is actually just having a relationship with somebody on the ground. So if you're a host and you live away, or, you've got a property manager in there, or you just you're not there all the time, like having someone on the ground that you trust and goes, look, there's been a storm, a tree's fallen down, like, Ben, can you go on, or there's been some accident that's happened or something, at least, to have someone on the ground that knows the property is really helpful for a host. And it's part of a team that I talk about, you need to have your team organized. And I think gardener maintenance is part of that team for when you're a host.
Yeah, absolutely, and that happens a lot with our display homes when we visit there. Metricon and Porter Davis, in particular, both have display home maintenance managers employed by them, but they rely on us a lot as well to report to them during those interim times when they haven't been able to get out to that property. They might have 80 plus properties across Metro Melbourne to visit, and they might not be there for a month. So similar to a host or a property manager, they just don't have the time to get there. And if I'm scheduled in to do that and I can spot something, it might not be something that I can actually action myself. But a leaking gutter, at least I can report that back to you or the property manager and say, this needs doing, and it's just another person on the ground, as you say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're spot on. Yeah. All right. I've got some quick questions for you.
Yep.
And they're quick answer questions. So, do you prefer dogs or cats?
Dogs. I got a little mini Groodle at home called Reggie. He's a legend.
Yeah. What's a Groodle a mix of?
Golden Retriever and Poodle.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Your next travel destination in Australia once the borders open?
Once the borders open, oh well, hopefully I'll get a few little trips in before the borders open. But I'd love to say the top end, Cape York or something like that, but probably more realistically Byron Bay.
Yeah. I hear you. What's your must-have travel item?
My trusty cap. I'm a hat man, so I like to have my cap with me, and I travel light, so cap to keep the sun off the face. That's enough.
Yeah, fair enough. I've got one other question for you. If you were going to have to do isolation again with somebody, who would you pick?
I'd have to say my fiance. I've just done one with her, and it was testing, but I'm sure it tested a lot of people. So hopefully if there is another one, hopefully we get through the next one a bit smoother.
Yeah. I think many relationships being tested in this period of time. Oh yeah. And my final question: what's your final garden tip for property investors? If you're going to have one thing to say, do this, what would it be?
Well, aside from obvious regular maintenance and employing me to do it, I would say this is a big one, actually. I didn't mention this before, but definitely have a look at a automated irrigation system. For an average size property, it's hard to say exactly, but I'll throw it out there. It might cost you $1,000. But it's all timed. It plugs into the wall, really simple to install, and it'll water your garden, in the middle of the night, so you won't be disrupting the tenants, and that'll keep your garden in good shape over spring and summer for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah, great advice. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. If people want to find you, where do you operate? I mean, this advice is Australia-wide, and we go Australia-wide, but you're based in Melbourne.
I am based in Melbourne, yep. So I believe you'd be able to Google me, but I'm working on that, on some more presence online. But definitely give me a call, 0413 257 747 if you're in Melbourne. And I'd love to help anyone out. We're really enjoying the new challenge of the short-term rental market. So yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, awesome.
And thanks for having me. It's been
pleasure.
Great.
Yeah, awesome. All right, hang 10, and we will. Everyone, thank you if you've been watching. Thank you for joining us. As I said before, say g'day in the post. Tell us if you're been watching on the replay, and do #replay. Give us some love. Give us an emoji. Tell us what you think. All right, thanks everyone.